The first time I saw her in my apartment building, I assumed she lived there. She was standing at the end of the hallway, completely still, facing my door. I had never seen her before. I didn't know her name. I didn't know which apartment she belonged to. But I knew exactly when she had started following me. Because earlier that night, she had been sitting in the back seat of my car, and I had watched her get out. Or at least, I thought I had. I was driving home from work just after midnight. Nothing unusual about that. My shift ended late, and the drive to my apartment usually took around 25 minutes. The streets were mostly empty. Streetlights reflected off the wet pavement from an earlier rain, and every few blocks, I passed another car heading in the opposite direction. I remember feeling tired. The kind of tired where you start thinking about everything waiting for you at home. My bed, my shower, maybe something to eat before sleeping. I stopped at a red light near an old bus terminal. That's when I saw her. She was standing beneath the shelter, alone. At first, I barely noticed her. Then she stepped closer to the road. I assumed she was waiting for someone. The light changed. I started driving, and that's when I heard the door unlock. I looked into the rearview mirror. Someone was sitting directly behind me. My entire body went cold. I almost hit the brakes. She hadn't opened the door. At least I hadn't heard it. But there she was, a woman wearing a pale gray coat. Her head was lowered. Her hands rested quietly in her lap. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Then I finally said, "Excuse me." She didn't answer. I checked the rearview mirror again. She was still there. "How did you get in my car?" "Nothing." I thought maybe she was intoxicated or confused. I pulled over near a convenience store and turned around. The back seat was empty. There was nobody there. I got out, opened both rear doors, checked the floor. Nothing. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I was trying to convince myself that exhaustion had finally caught up with me. I got back into the driver's seat and continued home. That was my first mistake. About 10 minutes later, I looked into my mirror. She was back. Same seat, same gray coat, same lowered head. This time, I didn't stop immediately. I kept driving. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the steering wheel. I said, "What do you want?" Her head slowly lifted, but I couldn't see her face. Not because of darkness. Her hair covered everything. Then she raised one hand and pointed toward the road behind me. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing was there. When I looked forward again, she was gone. That was the moment I decided I wasn't stopping anywhere until I reached home. I didn't care what she was. I just wanted to get inside my apartment. I parked in my usual space. For several seconds, I stayed inside the car. I checked every mirror, the back seat, the parking lot. Nothing. I grabbed my bag and hurried toward the entrance. The hallway was empty. The elevator was taking too long, so I used the stairs. By the time I reached my floor, I was breathing heavily. I walked toward my apartment. Then I stopped. There were wet footprints on the floor. They started near the stairwell and ended directly in front of my door. Bare footprints, as if someone had been standing there, waiting. I stared at them for almost a minute. Then I told myself someone from another apartment must have tracked water upstairs. It was raining earlier. There had to be an explanation. I unlocked my door, went inside, and locked it behind me. My apartment felt wrong immediately. Not different, just wrong. You know that feeling when you walk into your own home and somehow it doesn't feel like your home anymore? That's what it felt like. I turned on every light. Bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, nothing. Then I noticed something on the floor beside the couch. Water, a small puddle. I followed it. Another puddle, then another. A trail leading from my front door to the hallway and stopping outside my bedroom. I didn't go inside. I stood there staring at the bedroom door. Then my phone rang. It was my neighbor from across the hall. He asked why I was standing outside his apartment. I told him I wasn't. There was silence. Then he said something I'll never forget. Then who is looking through your peephole? I slowly walked toward my front door. I hadn't heard anyone enter, but the peephole was dark, completely black. I thought someone was covering it. I didn't touch the door. Instead, I stepped backward. That's when I heard breathing. Not outside, inside the apartment, behind me. I turned around. The hallway was empty, but my bedroom door was open. I knew I had left it closed. At the far end of the room stood the woman. Her gray coat was dripping onto the floor. This time I could see her face. She looked terrified, and she wasn't looking at me. She was staring past me, toward the front door. Then she whispered, "Don't let it know you can see me." Something hit the front door. Once, hard enough to shake the entire apartment. The woman disappeared. The lights went out. I stood in complete darkness. Then I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, moving from the front door toward me. I ran. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember opening the door. The next thing I remember was sitting in my car at the far end of the parking lot. My apartment building looked completely normal. The lights came back on. Everything was quiet. Then I looked into the rearview mirror. The woman was sitting in the back seat again, but this time, she wasn't alone. Everyone tells you the same thing when you're walking home at night. Keep your keys ready. Stay somewhere well lit. Be aware of your surroundings. But nobody ever tells you what to do when you know something is following you. And every time you turn around, there's nothing there. That happened to me for 3 nights. On the 4th night, I stopped checking, and that's when it finally caught up. I lived about 15 minutes from the train station. Usually, I walked home. The route was simple. Main road, small intersection, then a quiet residential street leading to my apartment. I had taken that walk hundreds of times. One night, I noticed footsteps behind me. I assumed it was another commuter, so I stepped aside to let them pass. Nobody passed. The footsteps stopped when I stopped. I continued walking. They continued too. I turned around. The street was empty. Not another person. Not another car. Nothing. I stood there for several seconds before continuing home. I convinced myself it was an echo, but the next night, it happened again. The footsteps always started at the same place, right after I crossed the intersection. One step, then another, always matching mine. If I walked faster, they walked faster. If I stopped, they stopped. The strange thing was that I could never hear them getting closer. They were always the same distance behind me, maybe 10 feet, maybe 15. On the 3rd night, I decided to test it. I suddenly ran. The footsteps ran too. I sprinted toward my building, unlocked the entrance, and slammed the door behind me. Then I looked through the glass. The street was empty. I laughed with relief. Then I noticed something. There were muddy footprints inside the building, leading away from the entrance, toward the stairs. The next morning, I asked my landlord if anyone else had complained about strange noises. He looked confused. I didn't tell him everything. I just mentioned the footsteps. He asked me which route I took home. When I told him, his expression changed. He said there used to be an old house at the end of that street. Years ago, someone disappeared while walking home late at night. The police never found out what happened. I didn't really believe the story until that evening. I left work early. It was still light outside. I thought whatever had been happening was probably connected to walking home at night. Halfway down the street, I heard footsteps behind me in broad daylight. I didn't turn around. For the first time, I remembered something my grandmother used to say. If you think something is following you at night, don't acknowledge it. I don't know why I thought about that, but I kept walking. Then I heard a voice. It sounded exactly like my mother. She called my name. From behind me, I almost turned, but my mother lived in another city. The voice called again, closer. This time it sounded angry. Why are you ignoring me? I kept walking. Then it started crying. I walked faster. The crying became louder, and suddenly someone whispered directly beside my ear, "Please look at me." I ran home. I didn't look back once. That night, I locked every door and window. I kept the lights on. I didn't sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside my bedroom. One step, another, slowly pacing. I lived alone. I called the police. While I was speaking to the dispatcher, the footsteps stopped outside my door. The dispatcher asked if I could see anyone. I said no. Then my bedroom door slowly opened. There was nobody there, but wet footprints appeared on the floor, one after another, as if invisible feet were walking toward my bed. I ran into the bathroom and locked the door. The police told me to stay where I was. Then I looked into the mirror. At first, I only saw myself, terrified, breathing heavily. Then something appeared behind me, a tall figure, standing in the doorway. I spun around. Nothing. I looked back at the mirror. The figure was closer. I shut my eyes and remembered the one thing my grandmother had said. Don't acknowledge it. Don't look at it. So I closed my eyes and waited. The footsteps entered the bathroom. They stopped directly in front of me. Then something whispered, "Too late." The police found me sitting on the bathroom floor. The apartment was empty. No signs of forced entry. No footprints. No one hiding anywhere. They assumed I was having some kind of panic attack. I didn't argue. A week later, I moved. Different neighborhood, different building, different route home. For months, nothing happened. Then one night, I was walking home. I reached the intersection and heard footsteps behind me. I stopped. They stopped. This time, I didn't turn around. I already knew what would happen. Instead, I whispered, "You followed me again." The footsteps moved closer, and something whispered back, "I never stopped." For 6 months, I thought the man outside my house was real. Every night, he stood beneath the streetlight across from my bedroom window. He never moved, never waved, never tried to approach. He just watched. Then one night, I finally called the police. When they arrived, the officer looked at the empty street and asked me the question that changed everything. "Sir, are you sure the man has always been outside?" I noticed him after returning from a late-night grocery run. I parked outside my house and carried the bags inside. Before closing the curtains, I looked across the street. A man was standing beneath the streetlight, tall, thin, wearing dark clothing. I assumed he was waiting for someone. I went to bed. The next night, he was there again. Same spot, same position. By the third night, I started feeling uncomfortable. I opened my front door. The moment I stepped outside, the street light flickered, and he was gone. A few days later, I went to visit a friend. I drove across town. When I parked outside his apartment, I saw someone standing across the street. The same man. I couldn't believe it. I told my friend. When we went outside together, there was nobody there. I started noticing him everywhere. At the gas station, outside the supermarket, at the end of parking lots, always watching, never approaching. Eventually, I stopped telling people because every time I looked away, he disappeared. One night, I decided to take a picture. I saw him across the street. I grabbed my phone, zoomed in, and took 3 photos. Then I checked them. The first photo showed the empty street. The second photo showed the street light, and underneath it, a dark shape. The third photo was completely black. I zoomed in on the second image. The shape looked almost human, but something was wrong. The figure wasn't facing my house. It was facing the camera, as if it knew I had taken the picture. That night, I heard something downstairs. I lived alone. I grabbed my phone and stood at the top of the stairs. The sound came again, a slow movement from the kitchen. I called the police. While I waited, I looked toward the living room. The curtains were open. Across the street, beneath the street light, the man was standing there, but something else was standing behind him. At first, I thought it was a shadow. Then the shadow moved, and the man disappeared. The thing behind him remained. The police searched my house. Nobody was inside. They found no broken windows, no forced doors, nothing. Before leaving, one of the officers looked toward the street light. Then he asked if I had been seeing someone. I showed him the photograph. His expression changed. He asked when I took it. I told him. Then he showed me something, an old photograph on his phone. It was taken outside the same house years earlier. A previous owner had disappeared. In the photograph was a man standing beneath the same street light, same height, same clothes, same position. I packed a bag that night. I was leaving. I didn't care where I went. Before getting into my car, I looked toward the street light. The man was there, but for the first time, he wasn't looking at me. He was looking behind me. I froze. Slowly, I turned around. The front door of my house was open. I knew I had locked it. Something was standing inside, too tall to be human. The man beneath the streetlight suddenly raised one hand, not toward me, toward the house, like he was warning me. Then the streetlight went out. I drove away. I didn't go back. I sold the house months later. For a while, I stopped seeing the man. I thought he had been connected to that place. Maybe he had been trying to warn me. Maybe he had been trapped there. Then last week, I was sitting in my new apartment. I looked out the window. Across the street stood the man. Same clothes, same position. But this time, he wasn't watching me. He was staring at the apartment building, at one specific window, mine. and behind the reflection of the glass, I saw something standing over my shoulder, something that had finally followed me home.